You know how sometimes you think you've got a celebrity's entire career figured out? Like, you can name their biggest hits, their most famous roles, and even quote some of their lines from memory. But then, out of nowhere, a fact comes along that makes you do a double take and question everything you thought you knew. Well, I'm about to hit you with one of those moments right now. Johnny Depp, the man who's been one of the most recognizable faces in Hollywood for decades, the guy who's played pirates, Mad Hatters, gangsters, rock stars, and just about every eccentric character you can imagine, his highest-rated movie on Rotten Tomatoes is not a massive box office hit. In fact, it's not even close. Yeah, I know. You probably already have a list in your head. Maybe Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl. Maybe Edward Scissorhands. Or if you're into more recent stuff, maybe Fantastic Beasts. But nope. None of those. The movie that sits at the top, the one that critics have rated higher than all the rest, is actually one of his smaller, quieter projects, a film called Ed Wood. And here's the twist, not only did it barely make a dent financially when it came out in 1994, but a lot of casual moviegoers have never even seen it. Some haven't even heard of it. So how did this little black-and-white biographical comedy about one of the most notoriously bad directors in cinema history become Johnny Depp's most critically adored work? Well, that's where things get really interesting. Let's rewind for a second. By the time Ed Wood came around, Johnny Depp had already made a name for himself as someone who didn't just want to be the next Hollywood pretty boy. He could have gone down that road easily, taken the safe roles, played the charming romantic lead over and over, and probably made a fortune doing it. But Depp wasn't interested in that. He was chasing characters that were different. We're talking about roles where he could disappear completely, morph into someone unrecognizable, and play around with quirks that most actors wouldn't dare to touch. That's why you get performances like Edward Scissorhands, fragile and shy yet incredibly expressive, or his offbeat turn in Benny and June. When Tim Burton came to him with Ed Wood, it wasn't just another project. This was something unusual even by Burton's standards. For one thing, it was a biopic, but not in the way most biopics are made. It wasn't a story about a groundbreaking genius or an unsung hero who was ahead of his time. No, Ed Wood was, by all accounts, a terrible filmmaker. His movies were awkwardly written, poorly acted, and often laughably bad in terms of special effects. But, and this is the part that makes the movie special, he didn't seem to care. He had a vision, he had passion, and he believed in his work with an almost childlike optimism. And that's exactly the spirit Johnny Depp brought to the role. Watching him in this movie is fascinating, because it's Johnny without the layers of heavy makeup or elaborate costumes to hide behind. Sure, the film has its share of eccentric moments, it is a Tim Burton movie after all, but at its heart, it's all about this endlessly enthusiastic man who just wants to make movies, no matter what anyone thinks. Depp plays him with this perfect balance of innocence and determination. You never feel like you're laughing at Ed Wood, instead, you're rooting for him, even as his films turn out hilariously awful. There's this almost magical quality to Depp's performance here. Most actors, when handed a character who is essentially a failure by conventional standards, would lean into the pity, the tragedy, the embarrassment of it all. But Depp doesn't. He turns Ed into someone who sees the world through rose-colored glasses. Every obstacle becomes an adventure. Every rejection just means he's one step closer to his big break. It's infectious. And the critics noticed. Rotten Tomatoes is filled with glowing reviews calling it one of Burton's most heartfelt films, praising Depp for making Ed Wood not just watchable, but deeply likable. And it's not just Depp who shines here. Martin Landau, who plays Bela Lugosi, yes, the real-life horror movie icon, delivers a performance so good it won him an Oscar. His portrayal of an aging star clinging to the last threads of his career is both heartbreaking and strangely beautiful, and the chemistry between him and Depp is what elevates the whole film. Now, here's something a lot of people don't know, Johnny Depp didn't base his Ed Wood on the actual footage of the real man. Instead, He drew inspiration from over-the-top television personalities like Ronald Reagan and Casey Kasem, infusing the character with this boundless, almost theatrical cheerfulness. That choice is part of what makes the movie so charming. It's less about perfect accuracy and more about capturing the spirit of the man. And this is where we circle back to the irony of it all. While movies like Pirates of the Caribbean were bringing in billions, they were never as universally praised by critics as Ed Wood. Commercially, Ed Wood was a flop. It didn't even earn back its budget in theaters. But artistically, it became one of those rare gems that ages better with time. Today, it's considered a cult classic, especially among people who love movies about movies. And in a way, that feels fitting. Ed Wood, both the real man and the character Depp plays, was all about making something he loved, even if the rest of the world didn't get it. Think about it. How many actors in Hollywood today are willing to take on a role that they know won't make money, just because they believe in the story? That's one of the reasons Depp's career has been so unpredictable. He's never been afraid to take a detour, even if it means leaving behind the safety of blockbuster territory. And here's another layer for you. Tim Burton himself has said that Ed Wood is the most personal film he's ever made. That's a pretty big statement when you think about it, especially coming from a director whose entire career is filled with deeply personal, stylized, and unique films. Burton isn't exactly known for blending into the crowd. His movies stand out instantly. You can recognize a Tim Burton frame from a mile away, whether it's the gothic whimsy of Edward Scissorhands, the surreal playfulness of Beetlejuice, or the eerie, dreamlike worlds of Corpse Bride and Sleepy Hollow. But when he calls Ed Wood his most personal, he's telling us that this story hit closer to home for him than any of his more fantastical, larger-than-life projects ever did. And when you start to look deeper, it makes perfect sense why. Burton has always had a soft spot for outsiders. His films are filled with characters who don't quite belong. People who don't fit into society's idea of normal, who see the world differently, who are sometimes misunderstood or even ridiculed for being who they are. It's a theme that runs like a thread through his entire career. But Ed Wood isn't just about an outsider, it's about one who refused to stop dreaming, no matter how many times the world told him he wasn't good enough. That's where the personal connection really comes in. Before Burton became the Tim Burton we all know today, he was just another oddball kid from Burbank, California, sketching strange creatures in his notebook, making home movies, and dreaming of working in Hollywood. He's talked about how isolating it felt growing up with interests that didn't match everyone else's, how his love of old monster movies and macabre humor made him feel like an alien in his own neighborhood. So when he came across the real-life story of Ed Wood, this relentlessly optimistic filmmaker who made some of the most notoriously bad movies in history, he didn't see a failure. He saw a kindred spirit. Someone who loved movies so much that he didn't care about the rules. Someone who believed passion mattered more than perfection. And that's why Burton treated Ed Wood differently from his other work. It's not drenched in the fantastical visuals that usually define his style. It's shot in black and white, for one thing, something you rarely see in major Hollywood productions of the 90s. That choice was deliberate, meant to capture the look and feel of the era and to mirror the low-budget films Ed Wood himself made. But it also stripped the movie of the glossy distraction of color, forcing you to focus on the characters, the emotions, and the relationships. Burton poured his heart into making sure the tone stayed warm, affectionate, and human. It's important to note that this could have easily been a mean-spirited film. Let's be honest, Ed Wood's movies, like Plan 9 from Outer Space, are the kind of productions people often mock for their bad dialogue, wooden acting, and wobbly sets. Another director might have played the whole thing for laughs, turning Ed into a pathetic figure and making the audience laugh at him. But Burton wasn't interested in doing that. To him, Ed was more than the sum of his mistakes. He was a dreamer with the courage to keep going, even when it was obvious to everyone else that he wasn't good at what he did. Burton saw dignity in that kind of persistence, and he wanted the audience to see it too. That's where Johnny Depp comes in. Burton knew that Depp had a knack for finding the humanity in eccentric characters. By the time Ed Wood came around, they'd already worked together on Edward Scissorhands, so Burton knew Depp could take a role that might look ridiculous on paper and turn it into something layered, funny, and deeply moving. Depp has this ability to fully inhabit a character without ever feeling like he's winking at the audience. In Ed Wood, he doesn't play him as a tragic fool, he plays him as a man who genuinely loves what he does and believes, with every fiber of his being, that he's destined for greatness. Burton has said that watching Depp work on Ed Wood was like watching someone channel pure joy. The performance radiates optimism, even in the face of disaster. There's a scene where Ed is trying to convince a group of people to invest in one of his films, and he does it with such wide-eyed enthusiasm that you almost forget he has no track record of success. That kind of sincerity is rare in Hollywood storytelling, and it's exactly what Burton wanted. And here's where it gets even more personal. Burton has admitted in interviews that, early in his career, he often felt like Ed Wood himself, pitching ideas to studio executives who didn't understand him, fighting for the chance to make the movies he wanted to make, and dealing with critics who didn't always get his style. The difference is, Burton eventually found mainstream success, while Ed Wood never did. In a way, making Ed Wood was Burton's way of honoring the people who never get that big break but keep creating anyway. It's a love letter to the misfits, the stubborn dreamers, the ones who keep going because they can't imagine doing anything else. When you think about it, calling the movie a love letter is the perfect description. Love letters aren't about pointing out flaws or judging mistakes, they're about celebrating what makes someone special. And that's exactly what Burton does here. He doesn't shy away from Ed's shortcomings as a filmmaker, but he frames them in a way that makes you appreciate his courage and his refusal to give up. Depp's performance was essential in pulling that off. He played Ed with this almost childlike innocence, which is a tricky thing to do without slipping into parody. But Depp committed to it completely. He modeled Ed's upbeat mannerisms on people he remembered from his own life, those eternally cheerful personalities who never let setbacks crush them. That personal touch gave the character an authenticity you can feel in every scene. And that's why, when Burton says this is his most personal film, you believe him. Because it's not just a story about a misunderstood artist, it's about the very thing that drives all creative people, the belief that what they're making matters, even if the rest of the world thinks otherwise. It's about refusing to conform just to fit in. It's about finding beauty in imperfection. For Burton, that's not just a filmmaking philosophy, it's a life philosophy. And for Depp, stepping into the shoes of a character like Ed Wood was like stepping into a reflection of the kinds of people he's always gravitated toward in his career. People who are unapologetically themselves. People who don't just break the mold, they were never in it to begin with. That's why the performance feels so heartfelt. You can tell it meant something to him. You can tell it meant something to Burton. And that shared understanding between actor and director is what makes the movie so much more than just another biopic. It's what makes it a work of love. There are so many little moments in the film that capture exactly why critics fell in love with it, and they're not the flashy, big-budget kind of moments either. They're small, human, almost fragile in their simplicity, but they leave a lasting impression. You see Ed standing in front of his ragtag crew, smiling wide, clapping his hands, and telling them with total conviction that they're making something brilliant, something that's going to change the world of cinema. This is happening while they're filming on sets that are literally wobbling when someone brushes past them, or while they're working with costumes that look like they were thrown together in a thrift store basement. But in Ed's mind, these are not problems, they're just little quirks that make the project special. There's a particular charm in the way Ed reassures his team. You can tell he truly believes in them, even when everyone else thinks they're in over their heads. When an actor flubs a line or a scene doesn't go quite right, Ed isn't frustrated. Instead, he grins, pats them on the back, and says, "Perfect. That's exactly how I wanted it." And you know he means it. He has this unshakable faith that they're all part of something important, even if the rest of the world can't see it yet. That kind of unwavering optimism is rare, both in life and in the often cutthroat world of filmmaking. One of the most memorable threads running through the movie is how Ed talks about his work. To an outsider, it might seem delusional. How can a man with no critical or commercial success be so certain that his films are masterpieces? But the way Johnny Depp plays it, you don't see delusion, you see pure, innocent passion. It's like watching a child proudly show you a drawing they made, not because it's technically perfect, but because it's theirs, and they poured their heart into it. Ed's movies, for all their flaws, are pieces of him. There's a scene where they're shooting an ambitious sequence, and right in the middle of it, a cardboard tombstone falls over. Most directors would yell, "Cut, fix the mistake, and try again." Ed? He just waves his hands and says, "No, no, keep going, it's fine." In his mind, the story is what matters, not whether the set looks flawless. And while, to a modern audience, it's hilarious, it's never played in a way that makes you feel cruel for laughing. You're not laughing at Ed, you're laughing at the absurdity of the situation while still admiring his determination to keep moving forward. This is where the magic of the movie really shines. It manages to poke fun at Ed's work while still treating him with compassion and respect. The humor is never at the expense of his humanity. You can sense that the filmmakers, and Depp in particular, have a deep affection for Ed, and that affection is contagious. By the end, you might find yourself rooting for him more than you expected, even knowing that his films are destined to be panned. And maybe that's the quiet message buried beneath all the quirky scenes and wobbly sets. It's not about creating something flawless. It's about showing up every day, putting your soul into what you do, and refusing to let other people's opinions define your worth. In a strange way, Ed's world, where cardboard tombstones and clumsy dialogue are just part of the charm, feels more honest than some of the glossy, calculated productions Hollywood churns out. He's not making movies for awards or fame, he's making them because he can't imagine not making them. That's what you take away when the credits roll. Not that Ed Wood was a great director in the traditional sense, but that he was a great dreamer. And maybe, just maybe, that's more important than perfection. That's the kind of message that sticks with you. And maybe that's why, even though it wasn't a hit at the time, Ed Wood still holds up all these years later. So, knowing all this, it kind of makes sense that Rotten Tomatoes would rank it above Depp's more famous work. Sure, Captain Jack Sparrow is legendary. Sure, Edward Scissorhands is iconic. But Ed Wood is something different. It's Johnny Depp stripped down to pure character work, without the distractions of spectacle. And in a way, that makes it even more impressive. It's a reminder that sometimes, the movies that really matter aren't the ones with the biggest budgets or the most special effects. Sometimes, they're the ones that sneak up on you, make you feel something unexpected, and stick in your memory long after the credits roll. So, here's my question for you. If you've seen Ed Wood, do you agree with the critics that it's Johnny Depp's best work? And if you haven't, well, maybe this weekend is the perfect time to find out. Because who knows? You might end up discovering a whole new side of one of Hollywood's most unpredictable actors. And just for fun, I'll leave you with this. Next time someone starts a conversation about Johnny Depp's greatest role, you can hit them with this little fact. Watch their face when you tell them it's not Pirates, not Edward Scissorhands, not Donnie Brasco, but a quirky, black and white comedy about a man who made some of the worst movies ever, and somehow became unforgettable in the process. Now, the ball's in your court. Does the crown belong to Ed Wood, or are you still Team Jack Sparrow?